I had always been interested in the medical field. After completing a nursing course, I landed a job at a private hospital. I was later granted a year-long leave from the hospital to pursue further nursing studies, and once I finished, they welcomed me back to my previous position. However, upon my return, I was assigned to the night shift. Adjusting was hard, as I wasn't used to staying up all night. Fortunately, my colleagues helped me initially, especially since most emergency cases primarily from accidents came in at night. It was common for 10 to 12 people to crowd around a single patient, often creating chaotic situations. During the early days of my night shift, I started noticing something odd. I would see the operation theater door open and close by itself. When I asked my colleagues about it, they all denied having touched the door. Assuming it was my imagination, I tried to brush it off. One quiet night with no patients around, I was watching a movie on a bench in the corridor. At some point, I decided to go to the restroom, but when I stood up, I noticed something that made me stop. My shoes were no longer where I'd left them. One was at the end of the bench, while the other lay out in the corridor. The sight stunned me, but I quickly put my shoes back on and went to the restroom. As soon as I locked the door, I felt someone tugging on it from the outside. Thinking it was a colleague, I called out that I was inside and suggested they use another restroom, but no one responded. The pulling didn't stop. I immediately opened the door, but no one was there. I stood there, paralyzed with fear. As my shifts went on, I started hearing strange noises around 3 a.m. every time I tried to rest, doors opening and closing, footsteps in the corridor. Strangely, these sounds only occurred when I was lying down and never when I was wide awake or actively working. I began locking my door during breaks, yet I still heard disturbances outside. It didn't end there. My colleagues eventually started noticing things too. They heard noises, saw shadows moving, and even witnessed wheelchairs mysteriously changing places. No matter how securely we closed the refrigerators, they would somehow end up open, and important injections stored inside them would be misplaced. Wheelchairs left by the main gate were found in random rooms, sometimes in gynecology, sometimes in the operating room. One night, a new staff member came running into our break rooms, breathless and terrified. When he calmed down enough to speak, he recounted a chilling experience. He'd been resting in the break room when he felt someone sit on his bed. He could feel the weight pressing down on the mattress, even though no one was there. That incident affected him deeply, and soon after he left the hospital, my own experiences continued. One quiet night, I looked out a window and saw our gatekeeper with a woman standing nearby. The woman moved strangely, dragging one foot behind her as she walked. Her face was terrifying, marked by deep lines, and she seemed to lack any expression of pain. As I watched, she gradually vanished into thin air. Not long after, I started experiencing episodes that felt like explosions in my brain, a condition known as exploding head syndrome. I would hear deafening noises while trying to sleep, but my body would be paralyzed. During these episodes, I often saw that same woman from the window in my dreams. She would approach me slowly, and I would try desperately to move, but I couldn't. I confided in my friends, and while they told me not to worry, They warned me to avoid looking out the windows at night, but that didn't stop the strange occurrences. A male colleague came to rest in the same room with me. As we were drifting off, we heard a woman's voice and saw what appeared to be a woman's dress moving in the corridor. That break room was for male staff only, so no women should have been there. I tried to go out and check, but my colleague held me back and whispered, "Don't go, just pray." The next morning, I shared the experience with my other colleagues who laughed it off as my imagination. But when we reviewed the CCTV footage, it showed a door opening and closing by itself. No one was in the hallway, yet the footage showed the door moving on its own. Most staff members only knew me by my first name, as did the patients. But one night an elderly woman approached me and addressed me by my full name, which felt incredibly strange. Her face was heavily wrinkled, and her voice was chilling. Then, one night while I was asleep, I dreamt that she entered my room. Her face twisted from a gentle look to a monstrous expression, and her voice changed from an old woman's voice to a deep, raspy male voice, calling my full name. I covered my ears and prayed, trying to shut out the nightmare. When I asked my colleagues if they'd had similar experiences, they brushed it off as my imagination. However, some of us, those who had faced similar incidents, eventually decided to leave the hospital. After quitting, the nightmares and disturbances stopped. I'm still in touch with one of my former colleagues, and even now, whenever we discuss those nights, he shudders with fear. That hospital holds secrets that are better left unexplored. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join my community for more chilling tales.